Alright, so hey everyone, welcome to another video of Salesforce Makes Sense, and in this video we'll talk about best practices again. We did cover Apex best practices. If you want to take a look at that, do take a look at that. And today we'll be talking about Lightning best practices. These are more on the Aura Lightning development framework side of the best practices, but you can consider most of them for the LWC framework also. Cool, let's get started. So the first and foremost thing that comes up when you are working with Lightning development components or Lightning components is server calls. The reason why Lightning is built and one of the important factors that Lightning as a UI or a client-side framework provides is that you have things called Lightning Data Service. You can use record forms, you can use record data, you can create your records by without even having to write any kind of Apex code. So try doing that whenever your requirement is pretty straightforward, but it just requires a bit of a change on the UI perspective. Go with the Lightning Data Service, use record view forms, edit forms, record data, play around with the data, show the data that it's supposed to have, maybe with default values, maybe with some logic, maybe hide and show fields, but use data service so that you are able to avoid server calls. The more server calls you avoid, the faster your Lightning component framework would produce the results, right? And that would be a better experience for your end users. So avoid as many server calls as you can. Wherever it is needed, it is needed. I understand that, but wherever it is not needed, do try to go for Lightning Data Service, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is styling. A lot of us are from a background wherein we have used a lot of HTML and CSS. We have used it with PHP, we have used it in WordPress, we might have used it in WooCommerce, Drupal, and other web development related coding frameworks, right? But Salesforce has its own design system. That's the Salesforce Lightning design system, the SLDS, right? And if you have SLDS, why go for writing something that's not responsive, something that has to be maintained? It's better to use everything out of the box that Salesforce provides, so that all your devices, be it desktop, phone or tablet, or any screen size on your phone or your desktop, it's automatically taken care by the Salesforce design system, right? So ensure writing more of SLDS, use more of SLDS classes to make your UI neat, clean and responsive, and avoid writing any kind of custom CSS, because today your code might work with the CSS that you've written, but tomorrow once releases come up or you have new releases, things might not work the way they were supposed to, right? Because Salesforce changed something with the new release. And also this SLDS also is upgraded as new releases come in, but your custom CSS has to be maintained by you yourself, right? Salesforce will not take care of doing that. So avoid writing custom CSS or even inline CSS, and keep it for scenarios where there's nothing SLDS can do, and you have to ensure that it's a hard requirement from the client, you have to achieve it. Only then in that case go for writing those custom or inline CSS, right? Because managing this style sheet later can become a pain. So always keep that in mind. Third thing is, it's definitely important to use the console to understand the JavaScript errors, because JavaScript is more like a silent girlfriend, right? She does not tell you what the problem is, but you have to figure it out on your own. That's how JavaScript behaves. But it's understand that you put your consoles, but it's also important that you clear them out, right? Now normally what I have typically seen with JavaScript code or Lightning Aura side handlers and controllers and helpers is that a lot of console.log is there with unnecessary messages, unnecessary JSON prints, which is not needed, right? It's definitely needed for development, but once you do that and your system goes live, all the console logs are actually printing on the browser. Your end user might see what messages you have put in, your end user might read the JSON, and also these heavy JSONs take up a lot of console size, they take up a lot of heap space, so that also impacts your performance. So once you are done debugging, once you are done developing a module, and once you see everything is working fine, remove all those extra logs, keep things that are mandatory maybe, but remove all the extra logs that are there in the system which were put for testing your module, right? That's one important practice. Next thing is Unbound Expressions, which rarely I have seen being used. Even I'm getting used to using this Unbound expression facility that Lightning provides. So if you have a parent-child component dependency, right? You have a parent component, and then inside that you have child components. You don't want your attributes to be synced always, right? Your parent might have a set of attributes that are unique to the parent, and it might not want to transfer or sync all those attributes to the child level. In this case, you can go with using unbound expressions instead of using bound expressions, right? So bound expressions, their facility and their feature is that they are always synced every time there's an update, right? Any kind of data update happens or any kind of refresh or re-render happens, the bound expressions will be synced even if it is not needed. And this additional sync internally consumes some time, and this also requires an event listener which is working for you, and it is syncing your data from parent to child every time, but it does not come into the picture, but it does hamper your time optimization. So ensure whenever there are attributes that do not need to be synced to the child and it is irrelevant for the child, use unbound expressions for them. You don't have to go for bound expressions every time. It's super cool. All right. The next thing is debug mode. Lightning debug mode can be enabled, and a lot of sandboxes have this debug mode enabled so that we can take a look at all the Lightning inspector and all the components the way that they are loading. But please ensure that your debug mode is off and it is not enabled in production, because debug mode makes the system very slow. And even you see a pop-up from Salesforce coming in that your Lightning debug mode is enabled, your system, your components might load slowly and might come slowly. So that's the impact debug mode has. It takes up a lot of resources and time to give you that results, or those debug statements or that information that you are looking for. But use it specifically for scenarios wherein you are not able to debug a specific when you are not able to specifically find a root cause, or you are trying to understand the component behavior but never enable it for long or for different users or for production at all. Cool. The next thing, modularization and coupling. A single module should be like a utility that can be reused. So always design your components keeping in mind that you might need it as a stub for another component in future, right? So putting all the eggs in one basket has never helped anyone. Segregate your modules based on what they should be doing. So your component might be doing three things. It might be sorting your table from A to Z, or 1 to 100, or ascending, descending. It might also be giving you a search facility. It might also be rendering new values that are coming without a new refresh. So these are three functionalities that you have put on your component, right? Now it's important that you keep these functionalities intact with one another, but also keep them independent. What would that do? Tomorrow, if you have to build another component which needs a search module, you can pick up this component and use it as a stub for that second component that you're building, right? Creating a lot of interdependency between your modules will only make it difficult for you to reuse them next time that you want it, right? Altogether, what you see, you actually have to just show things on the UI. You have to show them in a specific way, and then you have to do the database updates. It's all about the database updates, right? So showing things and giving those standard functionalities can be made reusable, right? And so that's why it's essential and it's important that your modules are made in such a way that they are not completely dependent or interdependent with other modules, and they can be picked up and pushed into a different component also. They can be reused. So ensure that is also taken into consideration. Cool. That was modularization and coupling. The next thing is lazy loading. So what we do is, normally in our init method, right? Our init method, what we do is we bring in everything that we need, but sometimes it's not necessary that all the data is immediately needed on the component load. So it's important that you don't proactively load all your data into the system before your component is actually showing up. You can get it based on ad hoc basis, based on the requirement. So you can lazy load your data. There's a concept called lazy loading. So you can do that, right? You might have 5,000 records in your table that you're displaying with pagination enabled. What you can do is, when the user clicks on next, you can get the next 20 records. You can get the next 50 records. So lazy load your data. Don't bring it all together at once. Yes, definitely there will be time wherein you will need proactive data load during your component render, but it's not needed every time. So based on the requirement, try to understand whether a lazy load would be helpful and will help your component speed time, and accordingly take that call, right? Cool. The next thing is caching. Caching data is important because like we talked about the very first thing, right? The server calls, wherein we talked about using Lightning Data Service. Lightning Data Service supports caching. So if you are on a browser and you have multiple tabs open, your Lightning Data Service will ensure caching is working alongside the component time to reduce the time taken to show your results, right? So speed is optimized and the server call trips are reduced, and whenever you are caching data, you are getting the data from a cached memory, not the actual memory, right? So try to cache data wherever possible, and to cache data, the very easy thing to do is use Lightning service. Cool. All right. And then you have conditional rendering. So use aura if tags along with boolean flags to lazy load templates or sections of your component so that component instantiation is faster. If the aura if tag evaluates to false, the template is not created as part of the DOM, which saves time and improves speed. Now what we normally do is we have an aura if condition, and inside aura if we can put some boolean flags, right? When we put boolean flags inside the aura if and aura else attribute, what happens is the component is instantiated faster. Why is that so? Because a specific set of the component is not being rendered at all. It does not have to be created. So it won't be created as part of your DOM structure, right? And because that happens, you are actually saving time and speed. So if you don't have aura if and you have just put, display is hidden or display is visible is to false based on some criteria, or maybe you are using some sort of class, SLDS class to, add class or remove class by toggling the SLDS value to show or hide. Those things will not help, and those things will still load your component, right? I mean, it will still create that component. What will aura if do? Aura if has the capability to not create that component if it is not needed. So if the boolean flag is evaluating to true, only then it will be creating that particular set of the section component, which means you are saving some time rendering your components and instantiating your component DOM structure, right? So try to use conditional rendering wherever you can using aura if tags along with boolean flags. Cool. Alright, the next one is event handling. So use component events for child to parent propagation, use attributes on the parent, or use aura method for parent-child propagation. Avoid using application events. So we have application events and we have component events, right? So component events traverse from child to parent, and application events do not have to have a child-parent relationship. You can move things from any component to any other component. You just have to register, fire, and listen, right? So for child to parent propagation and parent to child propagation, we should use component events, and for the latter we can go for aura method or we can use attributes, right? But we should avoid using application events because application events are on the application level, and one application can host a lot of components. So registering an event on the application level and then having other components listen it will take a lot of time, and that communication is a bit more costly in terms of your resources being consumed. So try to use child-parent propagation alongside component events, and for parent-child propagation you can go for the aura method technique, or you can also pass on the attributes that you have on the parent. And if you don't want to pass attributes that don't need to be synced, what do? You use unbound expressions, right? We talked about this very in the previous slides. So use unbound expressions there. Cool. The last one is unwanted JS libraries. So a lot of static libraries, JavaScript styles, sheets, things that might be needed are added on the top as the header, right? But what these unwanted static libraries do, they take a lot of space, and they are captured by the DOM, and they take time. They take heap space, they delay your component initialization, and don't really do anything. So ensure that you remove and clear out the unwanted ones, keep the required ones, and also ensure that the ones that you need are also minified versions so that they don't take up a lot of time. Or else when you try to understand the browser time or browser performance, or how your component instantiation is happening, you'll notice these unwanted libraries or these non-minified versions take a lot of time and are responsible for your component loading a little late. Cool. So keep this in mind. Let's do a quick recall of what all we talked about. So under Lightning best practices, let's avoid server calls as much as we can. Let's try to use more of SLDS instead of writing custom and inline CSS. We will do logging, but when we are testing and when we are moving our code, we'll remove all the logs that are not necessary. We'll use unbound expressions wherever we think that the attributes don't need to be synced between the parent and the child. We can use debug mode, but will not enable it for production and will not keep it enabled for long or for other users. We'll ensure that our components are not completely dependent or interdependent. They are a bit independent and can be reused and modularized, right? We'll lazy load our data. We'll not proactively load everything on init, and we'll do that whenever we think that there's data that can be loaded later and it's not needed immediately. We'll try to cache. We'll try to use Lightning Data Service to cache. We can use aura if tags for conditional rendering. This will save us some time and some space in the DOM structure. We'll handle events by using component events for the child to parent propagation and aura methods or the attribute method for the parent child propagation. We'll try to avoid application events, and if it is an absolute necessity, only then we'll go for it. And lastly, we'll remove or minify our JS libraries, wherein we'll remove the ones that are not needed at all, and we'll minify the ones that are needed, but we'll try to keep a minified version of them. Cool. So that was all I had on the Lightning best practices. I am sure that your trainer, mentor, your personal gut feeling has a lot of best practices that you guys follow. I would definitely like to know all of them, but this is what I found to be important, and some key practices, not really best practices, but yeah, some key practices that will help you become a better Lightning developer and help you write better code in Aura or LWC as well. So do take a look at it, do try to follow some of these, and do let me know if it turned out to be advantageous. And that's all for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.